It was big! It was all wiggly! And it ate everything!
That's horrible!
It was an Alaskan bullworm!
Well, it's not quite an Alaskan bullworm, but it is a wiggly worm that likes to eat. Today's topic is a parasite called Trichinella spiralis. Trichinella spiralis is a nematode that causes a zoonotic disease known as trichinosis. It can be found in rodents, bears, hyenas, humans, and many other carnivorous animals, but it is most common in pigs, earning it the nickname of porkworm. Humans and other animals are most often exposed to Trichinella spiralis by ingesting raw or undercooked meats that have been infested with the worm. We have a professor from Texas A&M here with us to talk about the unique life cycle of Trichinella spiralis. Thank you for meeting with us, Dr. Jordan. What more can you tell us about these worms, and why do you find them interesting?
It's an interesting parasite because it has an unusual life cycle. If you think about it, the infective stages are in the flesh of an animal, something like a pig, or it can be in other things too. Bear have been found to have it, and even humans. So it's interesting from the standpoint that one animal has to eat the flesh of another animal, and there's no outside intermediate hosts in the life cycle, which is kind of unusual. So when the infected flesh is eaten by another individual, say a man eats a pig that has it, it only takes a matter of maybe 4 days for these things to become adults. They're quite small, and that's very quick. And they don't lay eggs. The eggs hatch in utero, and those eggs then are shed into the intestinal tract of, say, the human host that ate the pig, and they will penetrate into the vascular system and be transported as larvae throughout the body. And these are the cyst-like larvae that you see associated with the musculature of, say, a pig or whatever is going to be the intermediate here. So it's very unusual from the standpoint that that's awfully quick to develop in adults. And the fact that one animal has to eat the other without an intermediate host, it's always inside of a host. It's never outside of a host in the environment.
Thank you, Dr. Dronin, for giving us a brief overview of the life cycle of the parasite Trichinella spiralis. Amanda, do you mind now telling us about the history of the disease trichinosis caused by this parasite that Dr. Dronin just explained?
Trichinella spiralis, or as many parasitologists refer to it as Trichania, historically became a distinct species in the mid to latter Miocene period, around 20 million years ago. The earliest human infection is reported to have been documented in the Egyptian mummy that dates to approximately 1300 BC. There's even a theory that some of the religious consumptive views on pork may have come from the early cultural awareness of the risk in eating pork or pork products. However, trichinosis wasn't defined until 1835, when two men by the name of Sir Richard Owen and Sir James Paget were performing an autopsy and found worms lining the diaphragm of the cadaver. For North American history, trichinosis became prevalent during World War II, when meat became more of a luxury item for families. Pigs would often thrive on any food source, so farmers would often utilize dead rodents, old garbage, and other trash forms to feed their hogs. This resulted in the pigs eating the trichinella eggs from the garbage, creating larvae, and humans eating the pork, thus obtaining trichinosis. Furthermore, this virus historically can affect people without the host even knowing that they are infected. There was a survey of the cadavers at a medical school in Northwestern, in which a biopsy of these cadavers found that 40% of the cadavers had the larval forms in their diaphragm, and they never reported it to the doctors when they died.
That's so fascinating, Amanda. Thank you for sharing about the history of the disease. Could you potentially tell me a little bit more about the economic impacts of trichinosis and what makes it, or why is this disease such an important disease?
Economically, the historical impact of trichinosis has affected how pork is processed and utilized in markets. Before the meat sells, hogs are hung in cold storage in the slaughterhouse. Inspectors will walk down the line and feel the diaphragm of the pigs as they hang. If the diaphragm feels like it has sand in it, they know that the larval, cyst-like form of the parasite is in the hogs. They have to take a look at the intensity within these hogs and determine if the carcass needs to be tossed. The USDA, or the U.S. Department of Agriculture, has set standards with what you can feed your pigs and rules with inspections to keep people safe. This is to prevent the same kind of massive outbreaks that occurred from bad feeding habits in World War II. This impact means that if meat inspectors were to find cases of trichinosis in hogs in storage, all the meat would have to be tossed. Furthermore, investigations would need to be done on the farm the pigs came from to ensure that the pigs are being fed proper supplements so as to not introduce the larva in the life cycle. This can create heavy marketing losses in pig production and increase the loss of consumable meat products to be found used by humans.
Awesome. Thank you, Amanda. So it sounds like it's a costly disease to maintain, and especially if the parasite's found within a pig farmer's farm. It could be a devastating blow to the farmer, and thus it is important to keep it in check. Thomas, do you mind giving us a little bit more insight as to the effects of Trichinella spiralis in humans and in animals? Like, how is it spread, and what are the symptoms that we may see?
Trichinella spiralis is a zoonotic disease. Transmission of Trichinella spiralis between animals and humans occurs only by human consumption of animal meat that is infected by the larvae of Trichinella spiralis. The most common route is human consumption of undercooked meat from domesticated swine that are infected. Infected meat must be exposed to the worm for 2 weeks for larvae to develop. The larvae have to move into striated muscles in order to be transmissible to another host. Human-to-human transmission is not possible except for in the case of cannibalism. Animal-to-animal transmission can also occur. For example, in the case of swine trichinellosis, the process of eradicating the disease includes rat control in other animals, no cannibalism, assessment of the infection in all nearby wildlife. If another animal species is infected, they can reintroduce it back into the swine population, so they must be isolated from these other species. Some of the symptoms in humans are gastrointestinal symptoms, and this occurs 2 to 7 days after consumption of the undercooked meat. And some examples of that would be diarrhea, abdominal cramps, and fever. The classic symptoms are occurring 2 weeks after consumption, and those are fever, myalgias, periorbital and facial edema, and just overall weakness. Some other less common symptoms in humans are rash, dyspnea, dysphagia, and hepatomegaly. Some complications are myocarditis, renal failure, meningitis, and secondary bacterial pneumonia. The symptoms of the disease in wildlife are not noticeable, so it's difficult to diagnose an animal.
Thanks, Thomas. It sounds like that with everything that's been covered so far, this disease is definitely an important one. It is zoonotic and it has substantial economic impact. And when talking about treatment, we can begin with humans. The most important thing to remember about this treatment is time. It must be diagnosed quickly, and antibiotics must be received quickly in order to mitigate spread and kill off the parasite. If it happens to be before the larvae become encysted within your muscles, you're okay. But there are lots of long-term negative effects of trichinella that won't go away if not treated in a timely manner. On the flip side, there is no treatment in animals. In fact, Iowa State's vet school teaches that no effort should be made to treat animals. Instead, they should be reported to state public health and animal health authorities. Which brings me to my next point, is that there's lots of control and prevention tactics when dealing with this disease. To prevent this disease in humans, one of the biggest goals that can be accomplished is education of the public. Educating people on consumption of raw meat, especially pork, but also from sylvatic sources. Also, educating hunters on proper biohazard methods to mitigate spread between animals, whether that be wildlife to livestock or vice versa. There also needs to be a stronger fellowship between the farmers and the veterinarians. If they work together and incorporate certified feedstuff and cleaner pigsties, they can achieve higher success in keeping out unwanted diseases from their meat. To prevent this disease from spreading in wildlife, I think there should be a risk-based management system. And with that higher degree of cooperation between farmers and veterinarians, it will be even easier to monitor and control any potential source of outbreak within your livestock. There's also an increased amount of monitoring meat in the slaughterhouse, and by keeping those mandatory inspections, it will greatly decrease the chance of an infection lasting too long before it is caught. This efficiency and timeliness is important when talking about decreasing speed and spread of infection. When dealing with pigs, I listed out 3 important factors that go into preventing an outbreak and keeping a tight rein on the spread of trichinosis. It involves a system upon which farms can be certified, and upon certification, they are subject to periodic spot checking to have accountability in their practices. All of this to say, the U.S. is doing a really good job of mitigating spread and controlling this disease. We have seen much lower numbers in recent times than even 50 years ago, which is very reassuring of the system that we have in place now.
Thank you for your excellent information, everyone. Remember to dispose of carcasses properly when hunting and thoroughly cook your meat before you eat it. Thanks for watching.